Repairing the chimney, the mason found a hollow room and a starving runaway. The mortar had gone soft in the north face, maybe 10 years of frost doing what frost does, and the whole stack needed pointing before the cold came back. That was the job. That was all it was supposed to be. The Greer place had sat empty going on 3 winters. Elias Greer died owing money to the bank and more to men who weren't the bank, and nobody had touched the property since the estate went into dispute. But the bank wanted it sellable and they knew I did stone work, so they sent word and I came. I'd done worse jobs for less. I brought my mule, 2 panniers of tools, mortar mix in a canvas sack, and enough food to last me 4 days if I ate plain. I didn't plan on finding anything except bad mortar and maybe a collapsed flue. The house had that smell empty houses get, not rot exactly, more like held breath. Dust on every surface, one window cracked from settling. I went straight to the fireplace. The stack rose from a double hearth in the main room, and you could see from the hearthstone up that whoever had laid it originally knew their work. Good coursing, clean joints, but the section above the roof line was a mess. Somebody had tried to patch it themselves with a mix too lean for the climate, and the freeze-thaw had done its work. I pulled my scaffold boards from the mule's back and started setting up on the south side of the chimney, where I'd need it. The morning was cold enough to see my breath, and the sky had that flat pewter look that means weather coming. I had maybe 2 days of clear work before rain, and I wanted to use them. I was up the scaffold, wire brushing out the failed joints when I heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like the absence of sound rearranging itself. You work alone long enough, you learn to hear what doesn't fit. 30 years of it teaches you to pay attention to what shouldn't be there. I came down the scaffold slow, not making noise about it. The fireplace, inside the fireplace. I crouched and looked up the flue, nothing. Then I looked at the sides of the firebox, and that's when I saw it. The back panel wasn't stone all the way down, left side near the floor. The mortar line ran different, newer. I pulled my pry bar from the tool belt and tapped along the line, just listening. The sound changed about 2 feet from the corner. I worked the pry bar in at the corner where the mortar was thinnest. The panel didn't break, it swung. Hinged on iron pins set into the stone, invisible when closed. Somebody had built this deliberately and built it well. I leaned in with my lantern. The space was low and narrow, maybe 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep, running back behind the east wall of the hearth. A hidey hole, old enough to have a purpose I didn't need to guess at. And curled into the far corner of it, knees drawn up, was a woman. She had her back pressed to the stone and both hands up, and her eyes were on me, and they were the kind of eyes that have been afraid so long they've gone past fear into something else. Just watchful, like an animal that has decided it can't run anymore and is waiting on what happens next. She wasn't much past 20, I'd have said. Brown hair matted to one side where she'd slept on it. Dress that had been decent once, maybe a month ago. Her lips were cracked. One of her boots had a split in the sole that she'd tried to tie closed with a strip of something. I didn't move or speak for a moment, just held the lantern steady. "I'm not going to drag you out of there," I said, "but I'd like to know your name." She watched me. "Mine's Cal Morrow," I said. "I'm a mason. The bank hired me to fix the chimney. I'm not the bank, I'm not the law, and I don't work for whoever you're hiding from. You can stay right there if you want to. I'm going to go put some water on." I backed out and stood up and went to the hearth to lay a fire, which seemed like a reasonable thing to do since I was now aware of what was on the other side of the firebox wall. I kept my movements plain. I didn't listen for her. I just built the fire, got it going, put the pot on the crane, and started cutting up the salt pork I'd brought for my own lunch into a pan. She came out about 20 minutes later. She came out stiff, her joints, or maybe just the effort of deciding to trust a stranger in a dead man's house. She stood at the edge of the firebox opening with her arms crossed over herself, and looked around the room, and then looked at me at the fire. "You're really just fixing the chimney," she said. "Not a question." "That's the job." "How'd you find it?" "I know stonework. When the joints don't match, I look closer." I turned the pork in the pan. "There's coffee when the water's ready. Sit down if you want." She sat, not close, on the far end of the old settle, back straight, watching me. I poured coffee and handed it to her, and she took it and wrapped both hands around the tin cup, and I watched her trying not to drink it too fast. "When did you last eat?" I said. A pause. "Day before yesterday." There was hardtack in the house. I put the pork and the pan bread in front of her and went back to work on my tools. Let her eat without an audience. You learned that too. Her name was Dara. She told me that much while we drank the second coffee. She didn't tell me more than that, and I didn't ask. There are times a man can figure most of what he needs to know without requiring someone to put words to things they're not ready to put words to. She'd come west in the spring on a wagon train with a family she'd hired on with as a cook's helper. The man of that family had decided somewhere in the middle of the Kansas plain that the arrangement meant more than it was supposed to mean. She'd gotten off the wagon in the middle of the night with what she could carry, which wasn't much. That was as far as she'd gotten before I stopped her and said she didn't need to tell me anything more. "I'm not going to do anything with it," I said. "It's yours." She looked at the fire. "I found this place 3 weeks ago," she said. "The door was unlocked. I thought I'd stay one night." "How long's your food been gone?" "The hardtack ran out yesterday." I thought about that. I thought about 3 weeks alone in a cold, empty house with the food running out, and whatever she'd come from still somewhere behind her on the road. "I've got enough for 2 people if we keep it reasonable," I said. "I'll need to send to town for more in a day or 2. I've got 4 days of work here, maybe 5 with the weather. After that I'm done and you can do what you want. But right now, there's no reason for anybody to go hungry." She was quiet a long time. The fire popped. Outside the wind had picked up and you could hear it finding gaps in the eaves. "Why?" she said. I looked at her. She wasn't being difficult. She meant it as a real question. She'd been through enough that she needed to know the actual reason. "Because it costs me nothing and it matters," I said. "That's all." She looked at me for a moment more and then she nodded, and that was the end of it. I went up the scaffold in the afternoon while she rested by the fire, and I worked until the light went. The pointing on the south face came out clean, tight joints, good slope on the weatherings, the kind of work that holds 20 years. There's a satisfaction in that kind of thing that I don't expect everyone to understand. The chimney was there before I was. It'll be there after. I'm just the one who keeps it standing. She had water on and the beans soaking when I came in at dark, which I hadn't asked her to do, and she'd swept out the main room without a word about it. I washed up at the pump and we ate without much talking. The quiet was comfortable in the way quiet can be between people who aren't pretending to be something they're not. I asked her where she was thinking of going. "I don't know," she said. "Somewhere I don't know anybody. Town called Winslow is about 40 miles east. Has a hotel, a couple of boarding houses. Has a doctor who's always looking for a capable woman to help with the practice. I've worked there, it's decent." She looked at her plate. "Is it the kind of place a person could start over?" "Depends on the person," I said, "but yes." She nodded, not like she'd decided, just like she'd heard it. The next morning I rode to town, not Winslow, the closer one, Callum Springs, for more supplies. I got enough for a week, which was more than I needed for myself. I got flour and dried beans and a bit of sugar and a tin of peaches, which seemed like something a person who'd been living on hardtack might want. I also stopped at the post office and sent a letter to a woman named Mrs. Pell in Winslow who ran a boarding house and who I'd known 20 years. I told her I was going to send someone her way who needed a decent place and asked her to treat that person right. Mrs. Pell was the kind of woman who knew what that kind of letter meant without needing it spelled out. When I got back, Dara was on the porch in the thin afternoon sun with her boots off, and she'd gotten her hair straightened out, and she looked like a different person from the one I'd found in the hidden room. Not better exactly, just more like herself. "You didn't need to go into town yet," she said. "I had a letter to send." She didn't ask. We settled into a kind of rhythm, the way you do on a job. I'd be up the scaffold by first light, she'd have coffee when I came down at mid-morning, and in the evenings we'd cook together, her doing most of it, which she clearly preferred, and me doing the washing up after, which I clearly did not mind. She talked some in the evenings. Not about where she'd come from, not at first, but about small things, the way a fire sounds different in the mountains than on the plain, whether a person could learn to ride late in life, what kind of work she was good at. She was good at practical things. She said she could stretch $1 until it hollered. I believed her. On the third day, trouble came. I was on the roof, working the capstones, when I heard horses on the road, 2 of them. I stayed where I was and watched. 2 men, both dusty from a long ride, came up the track to the house. I'd seen the type. Not lawmen. Lawmen hold themselves different. These were the kind of men who get paid to find things. I came down the scaffold slow. Dara had heard them from inside. When I came in, she was standing in the middle of the room with that look back on her face, the one from the hidden room, the one past fear. "Go into the back room," I said quietly. "Close the door, don't come out." "Cal." "Go on." I went to the door and opened it before they knocked. The taller one spoke. He had a way of making pleasantries feel like threats. Said they were looking for a young woman, gave a rough description. Said her employer was worried about her, wanted to know if I'd seen anyone. "I'm here alone," I said. "Bank job fixing the chimney." "Mind if we look around?" "I mind, yeah." The tall one's face tightened. "That's so." "That's so. You want to search this property, you go get the bank in Callum Springs to authorize it. They own the property and they hired me to work it. Man in charge of the work site controls who comes onto it. That's law in this territory." It was too. I'd had cause to know it. He looked at me for a long count. I held it easy. I'd had men try to stare me down who were a lot more practiced at it than he was. "Didn't catch your name," he said. "Cal Morrow, stone mason. I've got a contract with the First Territorial Bank of Callum Springs with my name on it if you want to ride back and check." The second one shifted in his saddle and said something low. The tall one looked at me one more time, then reined his horse around. I watched them go until I couldn't see their dust anymore. I went back inside. Dara was in the doorway of the back room. She looked at me. I could see her chest moving. "They gone," I said. She put her hand over her mouth for a moment, then she took it away. "He's not my employer," she said. "He was my husband's cousin. After my husband died, he said I owed him the debt my husband left. That's not how any of it works, but he has money and I didn't, and I had no one to." She stopped. "I just ran." "You did right," I said. "They'll come back." "Maybe, but they'll have to come back with paper from the bank, and the bank manager in Callum Springs is a man named Fletcher who does not enjoy being put out. By the time they talk him into it, you'll be in Winslow." She looked at me. "The letter you sent." "To a woman named Mrs. Pell. She runs a boarding house. She knows you're coming. Decent woman, straight, won't ask you things that aren't her business." I paused. "There's a doctor there who needs help. You're capable. Nobody there knows your name." She stood very still. "I'll take you as far as the crossroads," I said. "From there it's a straight day's ride on the stage road. Stage comes through Tuesdays and Fridays. Today's Wednesday, which means you've got tomorrow to rest, and then you go Friday morning. You'd lose 2 days of work. The bank can wait. The mortar's not going anywhere." She looked at me for a moment and something shifted in her face. Not gratitude exactly. It was past that. It was the look a person gets when they've been alone in it so long that someone doing a plain, solid thing cracks, something open they'd sealed up just to get through. "Why are you doing this?" she said again, and again she meant it as a real question. I thought about it for a second. "I've been doing this work 30 years, I said. "You know what the job is. You find where the stone has failed and you fix it. You set the joint right and you pack it tight and you slope it so the water runs away from it and not into it. You do it so it holds." I looked at her. "This is the same thing." She didn't say anything for a while. "Then you're a good man, Cal Morrow." I don't know that I said anything back. I think I just went to stoke the fire. Thursday we stayed in. I worked on the interior flue sections, the parts I could do from inside, and she cleaned the rest of the house, not because it needed it, I think, but because she needed to do something with her hands. In the afternoon she made biscuits from the flour I'd brought, and they were the best biscuits I'd had in years. She had a way with fire, with knowing exactly how hot a thing wanted to be. We ate at the table together and she told me about growing up in Missouri, about her mother, about the first time she'd seen the plains, and how the size of the sky had made her cry, though she said that with a kind of quiet embarrassment. "Nothing embarrassing about it," I said. "No. I've seen men cry at the sky out here, men who'd done hard things and seen hard things. There's just a lot of it. Sometimes a lot is a lot." She laughed. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh. It was a real one. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of anything in particular. Just the awareness that in the morning I'd be taking her to the crossroads, and after that she'd be gone, and the house would go back to being an empty house with a fixed chimney and nobody in it. I've lived alone most of my life. I know what that is. I've made my peace with it more times than I can count. But there are nights you make that peace more quietly than others. We left before first light. She rode on the mule behind me, which the mule did not enjoy but accepted. The air was cold and the stars were going. We didn't talk much. The road was rough in places, and I knew it and picked the better route without thinking about it. At the crossroads there was a cottonwood with a split trunk where I'd sheltered from rain before, and I stopped there. I gave her what food I could pack without gutting my own supplies for the remaining day's work. The money I'd been paid by the bank for the job, half of it. She tried to refuse it. "Don't," I said. "Cal, there's no argument to have about this. Take it." She took it. She stood by the mule and looked at me. The sky was going gray-pink in the east, and you could start to make out the shapes of things. "Will you come through Winslow?" she said. "Ever?" "I've worked there before. I'll work there again, probably." "Mrs. Pell's." "I know where it is." She looked at me a moment. Then she reached out and put her hand against the side of my face. Her hand was warm. She looked at me the way you look at something you want to fix in memory, something you know you might not see again and you want to have it right. "I see you," she said. Not like a line, not like a pretty thing to say, like a plain fact that she was telling me because she thought I ought to know it. I put my hand over hers and held it there a moment. Then she pulled it back and straightened up and adjusted the small bundle she was carrying and started down the stage road without looking back, which was the right way to go. I stood with the mule and watched until the road bent, and I couldn't see her anymore. I went back and finished the chimney. It took the rest of that day and half the next. I pointed every joint clean, set the cap, sloped the wash coat right, checked the flue draw. The kind of work you could look at in 20 years and not have anything to be ashamed of. I found the hidden room again when I was cleaning up. I closed the panel and pointed the seam so you couldn't tell it had ever been there. Didn't tell the bank about it. I don't know that it was anybody's business. 3 months later, I came through Winslow on a job. I stopped at Mrs. Pell's. Dara answered the door. She had an apron on and her hair up, and she looked like someone who had found solid ground under her feet. She looked like someone who had stopped waiting for the world to take something from her. She looked at me and smiled. "I told Mrs. Pell you'd come," she said. "She said men like that always do eventually." "What does that mean?" I said. "Come in and have supper," she said. "I made biscuits." I sat down at that table, and she put a plate in front of me, and she sat across from me, and we talked for a long time, the way people talk when they've been thinking about the conversation all the way through 3 months of ordinary days. When I left that night, she walked me to the door. The street was quiet, a few lights in windows, someone's horse standing patient at the rail down the way. She put both hands on my arm and looked up at me. "Are you staying in Winslow a while?" she said. "I've got a week's work here, maybe more." "Then come back tomorrow," she said. And she said it the way you say something that isn't a question, that is the plain, clear thing you mean. I went back the next day, and the day after that, and the week after the job ended I was still there. The chimney at the Greer place is standing. I've heard that. Someone bought the land, finally, and they said the stonework was the best thing on the property. I could have told them that. I was there when it was fixed.